and religion, two different degrees, two different PhDs. How did you do that?
Well, actually, they're not so different. When I studied theology at Yale, I studied the 19th century Darwinian controversies. And after doing that, I decided I had to learn the biological side, too, so I went back and got a PhD in biology. But it's all the same subject.
Well, it is very similar in some cases, indeed. Now, zombie science, I loved the title of the book, and when I first got it, I went, oh, my God, are we talking about zombies? Tell me about the title.
Well, not zombies in the usual sense. For me, zombie science is telling materialistic stories that masquerade as empirical science. So science is supposed to be about evidence. I'm a scientist. I test hypotheses against the evidence. But zombie science is storytelling that pretends to be science.
When we watch some of these TV shows, you know, these zombies just seem to be coming out of nowhere. They seem to just walk from the dead and everything else. On your cover, you've got us in this evolutionary state from apes. Excuse me, I'm choking. Got to get a glass of water, folks. Hold on. Jonathan, talk for a little bit while I get my composure.
Okay, sure. Well, as you said, the cover of the book shows a classic icon of evolution, the stooped-over ape-like creature slowly standing up and evolving into a human being. Only on the cover of my book, the last stage is not a modern human being, but a zombie.
Well, now, do you believe in Darwinism?
No, I don't. And that's a good way to put it, because it is a belief system.
Thanks for filling in for me for a little bit, by the way.
Sure, no problem. I have a glass of water next to me here.
Oh, my God, I don't know what it was, but it's gone away now, that's for sure. When schools would teach about evolution, and there seems to be a great controversy now about them and about evolution, what do you think? What should schools be teaching?
Well, I think they should teach about Darwinian evolution, but they should teach it honestly, and they should teach the evidence both for and against it. And there's actually quite a lot of evidence against it. But right now, it's all one-sided.
How so?
Well, you're not allowed to criticize Darwinism in the standard curriculum. There are organizations that actively oppose it, one of them being the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which publishes Science magazine. They argue that any questioning of Darwinian evolution is tantamount to creationism, by which they usually mean, Bible-centered belief. But it's not true. There's a scientific debate about Darwinian evolution, and students should know about it.
Do you believe that the humans, we humans, were created by God?
I do, actually. I don't know how, but I don't think that we're just accidental byproducts of a long process of natural causes. And that's what Darwinian evolution teaches.
And I agree with you. I don't know how. I don't know specifically if one would say, what is God? Who is God? I think that's up for debate as well. But there truly is something divine about all of this. It's not just a fluke. It's not just put together by nature. It just didn't happen. It's something that seems to be planned out. There seems to be too much order, Jonathan, everywhere. Do you feel that way too?
I do. I love to watch birds out in my backyard. I put a feeder out there for them, and I'm just constantly amazed at how intricately designed they are. And the idea that they evolved by accident just doesn't strike me as plausible at all.
All right, well, stay with us. Jonathan Wells with us. His book is called Zombie Science. His website, iconsofevolution.com, linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. So stick around, and we're going to take calls next hour as we talk about this incredible battle between Darwinism, evolution, and, of course, divine intelligence. We'll be back. What do your colleagues and peers say, Jonathan, about your work? Are they all supportive, or they try to fight you? What do they do?
Well, I have many colleagues who support me, of course, but I would say a majority of the scientific community probably doesn't.
How come?
Well, the scientific community, by and large, is pretty wedded to materialism and to Darwinian evolution, to the point where people who become students, young professors, and so on, if they betray any skepticism of Darwinian evolution, they often get the boot. And so it's sort of self-selecting.
Now, the subtitle of your book, More Icons of Evolution, what does that mean?
Well, in 2000, I published a book titled Icons of Evolution, and it was about 10 images commonly used in biology textbooks to persuade students of Darwinian evolution. And I showed that all 10 of them misrepresent the evidence. So they're not really evidence, they're images that purport to be evidence. And in this book, I showed that they're all still with us 17 years later, and I add 6 more that have been around for a while.
And when you point out that there are a lot of misrepresentations found in textbooks, for example, about evolution, were these misrepresentations, in your opinion, done intentionally to deceive, or do they really believe that?
Oh, I think most people who promote Darwinian evolution really believe it. But unfortunately, their promoting it flies in the face of the evidence. So at some point, they need to go back and, get back in touch with what science is all about.
I want you to take us back. And you're saying that evolution never occurred, or it did in some cases?
Well, evolution is too broad a word. That's why I say Darwinian evolution. I mean, evolution can just mean change over time.
Sure.
Or it can mean minor changes within existing species, which we see all the time. So there's no controversy there. We know that over time, over the last thousands or millions of years, living things have appeared that weren't there before, and others have disappeared, gone extinct. So these are all non-controversial senses of evolution. But when you say that what we see now was solely the product of unguided natural processes like natural selection and mutation, the evidence for that just isn't there.
I mean, it's very conceivable that evolution occurs, but it was organized and directed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I have no problem with that.
And, that may very well be the way it all started. Maybe it did start from little organisms and, work their way up, but it could have been planned that way, manipulated that way, and then, after billions of years, here we are.
Yes, that could exactly be the way it happened, and with, some kind of guidance and design and deliberate plan, I think it could happen that way. But to happen accidentally, the way Darwinian evolution says, just isn't plausible.
Even though, the ultimate point is who was on top to start all this, do you think it's conceivable that this jumpstart on this planet might have occurred from extraterrestrials who came here, as some people have suggested, and seeded what lifestyle, what creatures were on this planet at the time?
Well, if that happened, that doesn't explain where those came from. So it just moves the whole thing back a step.
Right. I mean, eventually you're going to get to the creator, the beginning, and that's what I think baffles so many people, Jonathan. I mean,
yes.
I hit my head against the wall every time I think about it. I can't come up with an answer. I can't even understand the Big Bang Theory.
Well, there's a lot of mysteries out there, and I think life is far more mysterious than the materialists will allow.
You look at RNA and DNA. Would you kind of explain what that is for people who might not know?
Sure. Well, DNA is a molecule that is in all our cells. It contains a code that's used by the cell to make proteins. And an intermediate step is RNA, so it's DNA to RNA to protein. Materialists would like to say that DNA is the whole story, people like Richard Dawkins, but it's not, because actually there's a lot more information in the cell than in the DNA.
Now, we hear them talk about junk DNA. To me, there's nothing that's junk. Everything has a purpose. But what does that mean?
Well, back in the 1980s, biologists discovered that only about 2% of our DNA is involved in encoding proteins directly. And so many biologists then said the rest is junk. It's just a, sort of flotsam and jetsam that got there by evolution and just wasn't weeded out. But as time went on, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, it has become clear that that non-protein coding DNA, in most cases, serves a function.
If you were in a college class right now and you were telling the class your theory on what you think happened, how would you start?
Of how life got started?
Yeah.
Well, I really don't have the answer to that, but I know it wasn't by accident. I know it wasn't just molecules coming together spontaneously. There had to be design involved.
Whatever that design may be.
Right.
I mean, there's some out there now, Elon Musk, for example, they think that we're in a digital world, that it's been totally created in some kind of computerized fashion. I find that hard to believe or understand, but something is going on, and we don't have the answers for it, Jonathan.
Right. That's
I hope
sure.
you. Will we ever get those answers?
Well, I don't know. It's certainly not going to be in the near future. I mean, there's so much about living things that we don't understand. There's plenty for scientists to do and explore for the next millennia.
What will it take for us to get answers? I mean, to answer some of the questions that you have, that you put in the book Zombie Science, that we've all talked about in this program, what will it really take to get those answers?
Well, I think the evidence actually does point to design. What form that design takes, where it comes from, the evidence doesn't necessarily tell us that. But the necessity of design is something we can infer from the evidence. And that's about as far as I can go as a scientist. Of course, as a theologian, I can start talking theology, but that's quite a leap between the two.
If you were strictly a theologian, would you come to these conclusions? I probably think so, right?
Well, my conclusions about the science are not driven by my theology. In fact, when I went to Berkeley as a grad student in biology, I had no problem thinking that, all living things are related through common ancestry to an original ancestor. But at Berkeley, when I studied the biology, the actual evidence, I concluded that couldn't be the case. So that was evidence, not theology.
We're talking Zombie Science with Jonathan Wells, even though we're really not talking about zombies. There are a lot of great minds out there. Stephen Hawking, for example, being one of them, who believes that there's life out there, extraterrestrial life. He's now beginning to understand the concept of God. He's written with a partner of his, Leonard Mlodinow, who's been on the program, about the concept of God. I think I can applaud scientists like yourself who begin to think about the God factor, whatever the God factor might be. I think that's very refreshing. You still with us?
Sorry.
There you go.
I thought you were talking about Hawking there. Well, I think reality is bigger than the material world, and so I have no trouble believing in God, certainly.
Why don't most scientists believe in God?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons, and of course there are scientists who do believe in God. But those who don't may have their own personal reasons. God is not something you can reach by the scientific method as generally understood. And so if they think science has all the answers, then God is not one of them.
Is it wrong to teach kids in school about the intelligent design?
Well, the Discovery Institute, with which I'm affiliated, does not favor introducing intelligent design into the curriculum that favors teaching students the evidence for and against Darwinian evolution. But if teachers want to bring up design, that's their business.
Can you create the argument against Darwinian evolution without talking about intelligent design?
I think so. I think the evidence clearly is against it. The thing is that the main point of Darwin's theory, as he outlined it in his books and his letters, was to get rid of creation by design. It was one long argument against creation by design. So that was a main point of his theory. If you refute the theory, then that opens again the whole question of design, and that's one reason why the materialists don't like to go there.
If you could talk with Darwin, what would you tell him?
Wow, never thought of that.
And he'd be all ears, so lay it on him.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, there was a contemporary of Darwin who did talk to him about these issues, Alfred Russel Wallace. And Darwin was appalled at the idea that natural selection couldn't explain everything and that there had to be design. He was appalled by it. So he'd probably be appalled at anything I had to say, too.
See, I would have told him, Charles, it's very likely and possible that creatures moved along in an evolutionary state, but somebody had to create that. Somebody had to force that to happen somehow, whether it was jump-started from the beginning or it was, constantly pushed along to reach this kind of level that we're at today. And I'm not sure, Jonathan, he would get it. Do you?
Well, he certainly didn't like the idea because Wallace would have said that, and Darwin objected strongly.
What would it have taken for Darwin to change his mind?
Wow, that's impossible for me to say. I don't know. I mean, I haven't figured out how to change the minds of his modern followers. So
let me ask you this, because this has a lot to do with where we're headed here. Do you believe in life after death?
I do, actually.
And I'm glad you said that, because if you had said no, I think it would have questioned the entire belief system of this process of God and everything else. I think if you believe in a divine intelligence, you've got to take it all the way. And that would be, the possibility that a soul exists and goes to, the hereafter and everything else. I would assume Darwin thinks when you died, that's it. It's all over.
Well, he was very cagey about his personal religious beliefs, partly because they were very unpopular in that day. So I really can't say.
I mean, would he be called an atheist today?
At best, I would say an agnostic, but I think more an atheist than agnostic.
Yeah, I think so.
Many of his followers fall into that category.
Well, and you're right. That would have been very unpopular in those days. I mean, almost controversial. They would have burned him at the stake, probably.
Well, not quite that bad, but it would have been socially unacceptable, I think, in Darwin's day.
Will there be any scientific breakthroughs, Jonathan, that will pop, which will help your argument and others who believe in that kind of theory of divine intelligence?
Well, the Discovery Institute, which is the sort of the international hub of the intelligent design movement right now, is currently funding several intelligent design guided research projects at major universities around the world. I can't say much more about it because the climate is such that the people doing the work would be persecuted by some of their colleagues. But hopefully these projects will lead to some interesting breakthroughs and help to, melt the ice a little bit.
See, I don't get where scientists who believe in the Darwin evolutionary process can't admit we don't know how it started. It's impossible for us to predict, and open up the possibility that what you're talking about and I'm talking about and what you and I both believe could be possible. They won't even let you think that.
Well, I found when I was a biology student and teacher that a surprising number of scientists will admit that privately, but not publicly, because they're afraid that it will, give aid and comfort to the enemies of science, whoever they are.
Well, when we open up the phone lines next hour, we're going to get all kinds of calls. We're going to get calls from people who believe in intelligent design and others who do not, but everybody has a chance to talk. But, I would, do you have children by any chance?
I do. My son, as I said, listens to your program.
Yeah. But I mean, children who subscribe to what you believe?
I would say, I have two children. I would say both of them do, at least in, general outline.
Yeah, because I don't know what would a parent tell a child about life and about creation if you don't give them that kind of foundation, I think, to go from. If you just talk about it in pure science, I think the child will grow up missing something, don't you?
Yes, it's a bigger picture than that. Unfortunately, I have friends who are, say, devout Christians who have children who have now grown up in the public university system and have become atheists.
Oh, they've crushed them.
To watch.
Yeah, they've taken too much away, and when you just have to look at yourself, your own life and existence, and question who you are, what are you doing here, how did this happen? The interaction between the people you love and care about, there's got to be a broader picture here. There's just no way, in my opinion, that this was just a fluke. It's impossible.
I agree. Yeah.
All right. It's where do people get your book, by the way, Jonathan? Zombie Science.
They can go to iconsofevolution.com and get it there, or they can go directly to Amazon.
Super. Okay, well, we're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to take phone calls with you. All kinds of calls, folks. If you believe in Darwinism, you can call. If you believe in just intelligent design, you can call as well.